morning, everybody. Welcome to Product World. Let me tell you a little bit about myself to get started. I've had an over 25-year career in product management at companies like Apple, Amazon, Discovery, T-Mobile, and Best Buy. And what you can take from that is that I've worked in a number of different industries across different domains, which makes my experience diverse. And diversity of experience is really helpful in breaking bias. So it's why this topic is really important. I'm also a lead executive in residence at the University of Washington Foster School of Business, where I co-created a program called the Product Management Leadership Accelerator. And this is a program that I run with 9 other executives in residence, and it helps senior product managers to really pave the path forward. Most recently, I wrote a book. And my book is called Creative Velocity, and it comes out in May from John Wiley. You can pre-order it now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But in doing research for the book, I spent a lot of time understanding cognition, cognitive biases, and how we creatively solve problems. Cognitive biases play a really powerful role in how we solve problems. They're mental shortcuts we use to get from here to there. They're ways that we process information, interpret that information, and make decisions based on that information. And they're crucial to our ideation process because they influence it whether we know it or not. I know this is impossible to read this chart. That's why I put it up here. There are 188 cognitive biases that Wikipedia acknowledges. And thanks to these people who created this amazing infographic, you can drill down and really understand them. So I encourage you to scan and save that and bookmark that page because it's really insightful and it probably will raise some ideas in your head that you hadn't thought about. Things that maybe you do subconsciously. And that's the point. Biases live below our level of consciousness and they help us adapt to things. And in many ways, they're very positive. But the things that can be positive can also be negative if they create a narrow-mindedness in our approach to problem solving. There are common cognitive traps that we fall into that block our ability to think big. For instance, we get functionally fixated on how things work. Functional fixedness makes us have a difficult time breaking patterns in processes that may support our products. And they may also create challenges with how we adapt our products with feedback from customers. Things that we think are essential may be actually less essential than you realize when you are fixated on how things work in the status quo. Data-driven decision-making is one of those biases that is good and bad at the same time. While we need data to give us signals, we also don't want to base all of our decisions on past performance. Backward perspective is actually a narrowing of our thinking. Because while you're doing that, your competitors are out there looking forward where the puck is going to decide what they need to do in order to disrupt your market. When you think about data-driven decision-making, what you want to make sure of is that your data, A, is not biased towards the outcome you already know, and B, that you question the data and ask, what am I not seeing in the data? What might give me an opportunity that we are not currently capturing in the data that we have? If you over-rely on the data you have about your product, you may actually miss opportunities your competitors discover. The false consensus effect is when you actually believe others think the same as you do. You believe that because either you're a leader and they don't want to tell you otherwise, or because it's comforting to think that people relate to a subject the way that you do. It's always nice to hang around people who believe what you believe. And if they're your friends, you're more likely to think that they believe what you believe. And the false consensus effect is really a version of confirmation bias, right? You're looking for people who are going to tell you what you're doing is right. I'll tell you a brief story personally about writing this book. People ask, how did you write a book? I didn't really know I wanted to write a book. I had an idea. And I thought, I don't know if this is a good idea, but I'm going to find people who are going to tell me it's not. So I'm going to give it to people who don't like me, who don't know me that well, who have nothing vested in my capacity to succeed, who will tell me it's a good idea, but maybe it's a blog post or it's not really a thing. You really shouldn't do it. After 6 months of doing that, I had the best proposal I could have had, and I was able to sell the book in 1 week to one. I think that is the epitome of understanding that what you're looking for are people who don't agree with you, to understand why they don't agree with you or why what you're doing is wrong. If you continuously find people who don't challenge you and who expand your idea and make it better, then you know you're onto something. I think that's super important. Risk aversion is going to lead to status quo bias, right? If your tolerance for risk is low, you're probably also having a high fear of failure. And both of those things are cognitive biases that are going to limit your capacity to consider solutions that are actually viable and valuable, because they might introduce risk or create a situation where you're perceived as a failure if it doesn't work out. So it's really important for you to understand your own risk profile, your team's risk profile, and your company's risk profile, because in selling an idea that might be dramatically different from how things are done, you will find people with this cognitive bias. This is what's important to recognize, and to recognize when that idea is being dismissed because of its risk level versus its value. So it becomes important to really assess risk in the group that you're working within. The originality myth, a lot of us fall proof. We want to create something brand new. We think it has to be entirely original. We think that it has to be something no one else has thought of, and that it actually could even be patented. Let me tell you that from 1790 to 2010, 77% of patents actually included two technology codes. They were inventions on top of invention. The idea that the originality of your ideas would make them valuable is just wrong. And that leads to us focusing on things that we think have to only happen in green space, where no one else is, or what no one else has done, or the way that no one else has done it. When in fact, you might apply something from over here to what you're doing now, and that combination is what is original. The way that's combined. When we look at things like Uber for dogs, you think of Rover, right? You're combining something that exists with something that exists. People need dog sitting, and you're making a new thing out of it. And that doesn't have to be entirely original, but it is original because it's applying it in a new domain. Problem framing is probably the Achilles heel of most product managers. When you define a problem, your cognitive biases just can't help but seep in. You're either looking for a solution that uses something and leverages something you already know. So now you've constrained down to an existing system or process, and you're thinking about that system or process as the thing that you have to include in your problem. And so now it's part of the problem definition. We have to make this order management system better, is actually focusing only on making the order management system better, rather than, is there a way in which we could process orders more efficiently? How you frame the problem often defines the solution. There's another problem which that the way that product managers tend to frame problems is the word choice you use. There are things called hypernyms and hyponyms. If you were to say, I want to find a way to easily staple two things together, you know your solution has to include a staple. What if you actually said, I'm trying to find a way to quickly and easily attach two things with whatever I have on hand? You might not ever come up with the staple as a solution. So the idea that you're actually looking for words to broaden your field of vision is a key to problem framing. And a bias that you have to work against is the one that makes you feel you know your domain so well that you start to choose words that focus everyone on a specific solution. There we go. So cognitive biases are, I'm just zooming in from that big picture that we had on some that are the most common that we see in product. Anchoring is, I got an initial solution, so I'm going to run with it. It's something that I feel I know. There's some data point I'm stuck on, and that's what's going to define the rest of the solution. I think everybody in this room probably knows confirmation bias. It's a pretty typical human bias, even outside of product management, right? We look for things that make us feel good about what we believe or what we believe to be true or what we've accomplished. And so we look for those data points. Again, I was looking for someone to confirm my idea was bad in order to make it good. And that's a good use of this bias, right? If I actually believe I'm on the right track, what would it look like if I wasn't? Right? How do I know this isn't the idea that we should do? Expert think is a classic one. You work in a company with people who've been at that company for years. And I worked at Amazon, and so many people at the company that were leaders had been there for 10, 15 years. And so we all defer to their knowledge of how things work because they're experts at it. But experting is actually a limitation. Because what you really want are zero gravity thinkers, people who are willing to let go of their expertise in order to imagine something that doesn't exist, right? So you want to get away from the expertise as being the center of your decision-making or problem solving and consider it as just another input in what it is you're trying to do. Projection bias is a classic example where you take the thing that you knew before and you just assume it's going to be true in the future. You project it out, then you say, this is true, this is going to happen, and so this is exactly where we should be going. And so you assume that past performance is indicative of future behavior. Egocentrism is the one where we believe we're right, we're so right, we know all the data that tells us we're right, to the exclusion of any other point of view. What that creates is an empathy gap, which is the worst thing for product managers to have. An empathy gap where they are not listening to other perspectives and understanding those perspectives, even if they choose later not to incorporate them. You have to be willing to synthesize them into your decision making. You have to be able to acknowledge they exist. And you definitely have to feel comfortable with the idea that not everyone will agree with you, but at least you've understood what the objections might be. And you may have even factored into your solution ways to handle. So getting around that egocentricity is critical, because the worst version of this is when you think you're part of the customer segment and then you realize that nobody in that segment has the same motivation you do to solve the problem. That's the worst version of this, right? I am like my customers, so they should want this as much as I do. And that's actually not often the case, right? You may be a part of the segment where you may have things in line with that segment, but you may not actually speak for everyone in that. And so egocentrism is probably the one that's most risky for all of us who feel so confident because we have the data and the history and the experience that our customers don't. And then lastly is authority. I think we've all at some point in our career, and probably when we were more junior, had this belief that the highest paid person in the room knows better. They just do. They've been here longer, they're getting paid a lot, so they must know a lot. And I have a little bit of imposter syndrome at this point because I haven't really got my sea legs underneath me. And I'm not really sure that I know all the things I need to know in order to make a really smart decision. So I'm going to over-index to the people who I think are authoritative, and I'm going to take that vector to solve my problem. This becomes even worse when you think about factoring in AI as your authority, right? If you aren't willing to challenge AI, then you are absolutely going to succumb to this bias. And when I say challenge AI, ask questions, ask the why. Pound it further. In writing the book, I did an exercise on a logic puzzle. And I wrote the puzzle, so I knew what the solution was. And so I gave ChatGPT all the facts. And then I said, at the end, who does this? Who lives here? It gave me an answer back very authoritatively. It just so happened it ignored 3 of the facts in the list of facts I gave. And I don't know why I did that. So I asked, why did you do that? They're like, oh, you're right. Ran it again and ignored 2 different facts. And I still couldn't understand why it was picking what it was picking or how it decided which ones to ignore. So then I said, here's the answer I believe is true. Can you disprove this? And it said, no, that's right. You're right. That is the right answer. So even if the sense language model had all the same data I had, it shows in its own bias which facts not to include in the solution. Our preferred cognitive styles definitely influence our approach to problem solving. And the thing to know is our preferred problem solving style leans into our biases from that big graph of how we process information, what information we value, what information we dismiss, what we recall and why we recall it. And all of that tells us how to make a decision, right? We process all of those things and we think about it. The thing is, not like a personality test, which is you are what you are. If you're an extrovert, it's going to be hard for me to train you to be an introvert and vice versa. Here, you can actually be trained to have different problem solving skills for different circumstances. And that will become really important when we talk about this in a few minutes in the product life cycle, because different problem solving skills matter when you're in the conceptualizing stage than when you're in the sustainability stage. And you might think of that as something that you're better at one than you're better at the other, but you'll see how important it is for you to be able to be good at as many of them as you can. Pointing. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, there we go. Ambassador, who founded the Center for Research in Applied Creativity, developed creative problem-solving profile. And you can actually go to ambassadorprofile.com and pay $60 to see if the thing you think you are is what the test actually shows you are. But these 4 personality types, these 4 state of mind, creative state, are not personality types. So you move between them. At different points in your life, you might move between them, because at other points in your life, you may feel more free to create than you do when you feel more responsible to implementing and operating. These things change, and that's the good news, is that you can actually move between them. You're not stuck in one of them, even if you recognize yourself now as one type. You can actually move through these profiles and actively work against your biases. I always find people who love to create new ideas because I love that. But I've learned over time the importance as a leader of being strong at sustainability. And so I can't just say, I'm going to go side with this part of my team and let the other people who worry about sustainability be good at that. I would actually build a team that's good at all of these things. Because companies that actually build a team that solve problems the same way end up missing whole portion of the playing field. And sometimes an idea is great from concept to execution, but then it's not sustainable. It wasn't built sustainably. It wasn't thought of when it was created as a product that needed to be sustainable. A great quick example of this is when I was at T-Mobile, we created a 3G wireless picture frame. And this was before the first Android phone or the iPhone had launched. And we knew that people had a problem with Wi-Fi picture frames because the memory card, nobody ever changed. Thought, oh, if we could make your picture frame like the phone, you could take pictures to it all the time. And it would be something that would be updated online and people would love it. And we're delighted by it. We did a prototype. People loved it. We're delighted by it. We just asked about how to sell it. And at that time, there was no way to sell a data-only product. And so the market for that product was only existing T-Mobile customers, which did not justify maintaining that product. But because we looked at it as amazing customer-driven innovation, we figured out that it was something to build. We just didn't figure out, because everyone was on the side of the matrix, on the generators and conceptualizers side. We didn't have anybody in our team that was on the optimizer and implementer side. And it really ultimately killed the product. So companies have to have the capacity to cover the basics over the product lifecycle with the type of problem solvers that they have on the team. Where am I pointing? About it. Huh? About it. Okay. It takes conscious effort to bust biases. You can apply conscious effort to bust biases. And the importance of this is that you recognize that biases are automatic and they live below the surface because they're there to help us operate effectively, act quickly, make decisions with less information when we need to make a decision. And that particular skill of being able to do that means you have to focus on it in order to undo it. You have to really imagine how you're going to work around your natural tendencies if you want to open up your decision-making skill and unblock your capacity to innovate. So there are 5 keys to busting these cognitive biases. The first is self-awareness, right? You have to know that you have them. You have to understand how you react to things, what your triggers are. You have to recognize those behaviors that actually make you more limited in your thinking. There are structured frameworks, actual practical techniques, and we'll cover a lot of them in the book with exercises, but they're there to help you manage your discomfort as you're trying to change your problem-solving profile, right? You're able to learn these new techniques and be more comfortable at different stages in product development that you can solve the problems that exist. Cognitive flexibility, again, practicing, do the things that you are not naturally predisposed to do, actually make you more creative. That's the part about creativity that I love. That people just think it's something other people do and they don't have. And it's largely because they don't think about it enough to practice. Actually nurture it, to indulge it, to growing and to be more capable of solving a wider range of problems. It comes with perspective shifting. If you can start with perspective shifting and empathy, you are more likely to have cognitive flexibility because you're more willing to see a situation from a different point of view. Maintaining curiosity is the easiest tool to bust almost all biases, because if you're asking questions, if you're seeking other perspectives, if you're actually out there trying new things, you are going to be more open-minded and more willing to look at a solution that wasn't right in front of your nose. And open-ended question, not having an answer to the question before you pose it, really going off and doing something in a different area. One of the reasons that I changed domains is because I love the challenge of what's a new product management, applying it in all sorts of different situations, big companies, media companies, old retailers, brick and mortar retailers. And that was exciting because it really spawned my interest in learning and curiosity. And then psychological distance is really a critical thing. You can't get wrapped up in something because you're so close to it. You really do need to look at that problem with a little bit of distance. And this is where AI can be really helpful, because AI is not attached to any of your problem. AI doesn't have any bias towards your emotions or your experience. And so you can see things in a clearer lens when you ask that question or use a framework and explore an idea with AI. So these leveraging these structured frameworks, applying human discernment, like AI can come up with some great ideas, but it's up to you to decide what are relevant, what are valuable, what are meaningful to your customers, and really what actually address the problem you're trying to solve in the way you need to solve it. And that's where human discernment in partnership with generative AI can actually double your velocity, because you'll get this volume of ideas and then you'll be just filtering what makes the most sense. You want to challenge the initial output and you want to assess the reference sources. As I said, the most important thing here is that you recognize at different stages of the product lifecycle, represented by the 4 S's, that it takes different skills to be a creative problem solver. And if you want to move around them, you want to practice them. For instance, when I'm implementing, I want to think, what's the worst that could happen? How do I avoid that? What if the opposite happens of what I want to happen? Then what do I do? That's a great way to think about scaling and sustainability. Whereas when I'm thinking about generating something, improv, abstract thinking, these things on the red side of the diagram are really what are helpful and really valuable to making sure that you're exploring the broadest field of solutions. And then there are techniques like Scamper, which allow you to deconstruct the problem, look at elements of the problem, and decide which elements of the problem you really can discard. So if you want to learn more about this, as I said, have a book. I don't know how many more you're going to get, but please feel free to scan and you will get to my book website and you'll be able to not only pre-order the book, but you'll actually get bonus content if you pre-order the book. We're making some bonus content. I have interviewed 10 people and not all of the content was able to make it into the book. So you'll see some extra interview content that's there. You'll have early access to the first 2 chapters. And you'll also get a discount on my Maven course on creative problem solving. Please take care of that. And hopefully you get some value on one of those things. And then I'm going to be doing a roundtable as well at 11 o'clock. So hopefully that works out for you and you can jump into the roundtable if you have any further questions.